Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about An Ice Cold Mother Part 5. Today we're going to be discussing the life of Shonda Vander Ark. Sometime in the beginning of 2022, Adam Vander Ark would actually suffer a stroke. And the stroke would be so severe that he would require 24/7 care and would need someone to take care of him around the clock at all times. And Shonda Vander Ark would actually suggest that he leave his home and move in with his parents in Florida. And it's my personal belief that Shonda would suggest this so it would leave her home alone with not only Paul Ferguson, but Timothy and Gabriel, and this would give Shonda full reign to abuse Timothy as much as she wanted. And unfortunately, Adam Vander Ark would actually listen to Shonda, and he would leave his home in Rapid Springs, Michigan, and move to Florida to be with his parents, where they could actually give him 24/7 care. And now, with Adam Vander Ark not in the picture and in Florida, Shonda could actually not have to restrain herself and be as brutal and heartless and relentless to Timothy as she wanted. One of her big fighting arguments after being caught is she would say that Timothy would just eat too much food and was constantly in the cabinets and the refrigerators and was constantly feeding himself. But this is through the testimony of Shonda. And in Shonda's eyes, the best way to punish Timothy for eating was to starve him. So she would go out and purchase these locks, and she would put locks on not just the refrigerator, but the freezer and all the cabinets, so that Timothy couldn't get into any of these things without her opening them. And we're not talking like making a kid miss a meal here and there. We're talking full on, she would starve Timothy for days. And it said during these times, she would actually send Timothy down to his room in the basement, because he shared a room with Paul at the time, and would make him stay in his room and just not eat for days. And it's around this time that not only would she starve Timothy, but she would start physically abusing him. It's not said that if she ever laid a hand on him in a physical manner, but the type of physical abuse that Timothy would receive would be, if you can believe it, much worse. One of the things that she would start doing is she would start making Timothy run. And not just run, but run for hours. And what she would do is she would tell Timothy to go all the way down to the basement, and he would have to run up the stairs, through the house, up the upstairs of the house, back down, and then run to the back door, run down those stairs, and then just repeat these cycles for hours and hours on end, to the point that he would almost fall over from the amount of running he was doing. Not only would she have Timothy run throughout the house for long periods of time, but she would also, like her ex-husband Eric, would make Timothy do very prolonged wall sits. And he would also have to do these wall sits for hours and hours at a time. And by the time that he would be allowed to go to bed, his legs would be in crippling pain. The next thing Shonda would do is she would take away, in her words, Timothy's bedroom privileges. And what I mean by that is she would actually make Timothy move out of the room that he had shared with his brother Paul, and would actually make him sleep in a closet. In the beginning, she would consider herself a good mother, because she would at least give him a mattress to sleep on in the closet. And this is what Shonda would do every single day, is she would make Timothy run all day or do wall sits all day, and make him sleep in a very small closet, while also starving him every single day. But Shonda would have a 9-to-5 job. And she didn't like the fact that Timothy was not going to be disciplined while she was at work. So it's at this time, Paul Ferguson, and she would actually ask Paul if he would be okay with disciplining Timothy while she was at work. And surprisingly enough, Paul had no problem disciplining Timothy, which I don't see how they would refer to it as disciplining when it was full-on abuse and torture. So while Shonda was at her clerk job from 9 to 5, Paul would be in charge of torturing and abusing Timothy. And then when Shonda would get home, she would be in charge of the treatment of Timothy. And Shonda would monitor what was going on in her home by installing a bunch of CCTV security cameras inside her home. If you remember in earlier videos, I said when she had done this, when she was married to Eric, that this would become very significant later on down the road. And this is what I mean. She would install these cameras, and these would be the type of CCTV cameras that you could connect to your phone. And so while she was at work, she could actually pull out her cell phone and look at what was going on. And it was one of those very advanced cameras to where she could actually speak into her phone and her voice could come through the monitors and they could actually hear Shonda while she was at work. For example, she would get on her phone and she would tell Paul, "I see Timothy's in the kitchen trying to get something to eat. Get him out of the kitchen." Or on another occasion, she would call out, "Hey, Paul, I see that Timothy's not doing anything. Make him run up down the stairs for 3 hours." Keep in mind, Shonda's job was she was a clerk at a courthouse, and she would be saying these things in her phone in a courthouse around other people. In fact, a fellow co-worker would recall on one instance where she would be standing there yelling at her phone, "No, get away from the fridge. You cannot eat. You've already eaten what's been provided for you." And Shonda was really trying to keep Timothy a secret, but she would still talk to all of her colleagues about Timothy, but she would only refer to Timothy as her problem child. And her colleagues would not know who Timothy was until after everything had happened. But her colleagues would recall her constantly talking about her problem child, and she would go into her many details and be very descriptive on how harsh her punishments were. She would describe like the constant running, the starving, and the wall sits as if what she was doing was perfectly okay and not considered abuse. She would even go in great detail about how one afternoon she would actually lock Timothy outside all night in the freezing cold in winter and would not let him inside until the next day. And keep in mind, there was no time where they were not abusing Timothy. This would go on for months and months, every single day. And the punishments would even get more sadistic. And what I mean by that is she would not only get the CCTV cameras, but she would actually start installing sensors around the house. Not only would she install them around the house, but she would actually get one of those belt type sensors and actually make Timothy wear it at all times. And keep in mind, out of all of the disabilities that Timothy had, he did not like loud noises. And what would happen is, if Timothy went anywhere that Shonda did not want him going, she would just hit this button and it would sound a very loud alarm, which would freak and distress Timothy out. And if he was ever in bed, if he ever moved slightly, Shonda would just hit that button whenever she wanted. And this would distress Timothy so bad that a lot of times when she would just scare him, he would almost always wet the bed. And Shonda would make it seem like Timothy was just a bad kid. And she would take the mattress she had in the closet and then replace it with a blue tarp and make him sleep on this blue tarp as a makeshift bed.